At my grandfather's 78th birthday party, a video surfaced that no one expected. And in that moment, my future changed forever. My name is Valerie Stratton. After the celebration ended, I returned to the venue to retrieve a handbag I'd left on my chair. I thought it would take just a couple of minutes. As I entered the hallway, a security guard stopped me. He glanced around and then quietly motioned me to follow him into the control room. "What you're about to see will change how you think," he whispered, his voice so low it sent chills down my spine. And he was right. He played the footage from the overhead camera at our table. The moment I turned my back to toast my grandfather, everything unfolded in clear detail. Someone close to me pulled a small vial from their pocket and poured a clear liquid into my water glass. Another person blocked the view, while a third scanned the room and gave a subtle nod. They shared a quiet smile I'd always believed was warm and familiar. When I turned back and took a sip, my hands began shaking uncontrollably. I gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. My stomach twisted and my mind went blank. The guard quietly asked if I was okay, or if he should call someone. I could only shake my head. No words came out, just silent tears. The people I trusted most had done this in front of everyone, and I had drunk it unknowingly. Where are you hearing this story from? Drop your location in the comments and tell me. Have you ever discovered betrayal from the people closest to you? What would you do first in my position? I really want to know. I drove home that night in silence, the city lights blurring past. By the time I reached our family estate outside Chicago, my hands were still gripping the steering wheel tightly. I went straight to my private office on the second floor, the one room in the house that always felt solely mine, and sank into the leather chair. I reflected on the years I'd invested in Stratton Real Estate Group. Grandpa Harold had trusted me with major responsibilities around the time I turned 30, assigning projects no one else would touch. I remembered one particularly complex deal 5 years ago, a prime downtown parcel entangled in a bad contract that threatened a $20 million loss. I flew out to negotiate directly with the sellers, working nights to review every clause, and turned it around single-handedly. When it closed, Grandpa publicly praised me in front of the executive board, saying I was the only one with the vision to see it through. It felt like genuine recognition, the kind that made long hours worth it. But my parents and Grant were always on the sidelines, offering polite smiles before steering conversation elsewhere. Dad would say Valerie did well, but leading long-term as a woman in this industry is tough. Mom would add, Grant's picking things up quickly. He'll help steady everything. Grant would nod, rarely participating in the actual work. Yet, whenever Grandpa asked about his contributions, my parents defended him. At the time, I brushed it off as fairness between siblings. Looking back, though, the pattern is clear. They were slowly erasing my accomplishments, treating them as temporary because, in their eyes, a daughter couldn't hold the reins permanently. I leaned back, staring at framed photos, me shaking hands at closings, Grandpa and I reviewing blueprints late into the evening. Those moments had felt solid, yet my family consistently redirected praise toward Grant, framing me as a capable interim leader rather than the permanent head. Despite presenting strategies that doubled portfolio value in key sectors, generating measurable revenue growth, and mitigating risks that saved millions, recognition was always tempered with remarks about the challenges of being a woman in leadership. The more I reflected, the clearer the pattern became. Family dinners where Grandpa boasted about my wins would inevitably pivot to Grant's minor accomplishments, always diminishing my role. Even Brooke, Grant's wife, would make casual comments about a future when everyone could relax. I laughed it off, telling myself it was old-fashioned thinking, believing it would fade. Grandpa had repeatedly acknowledged my worth, but alone in the office, doubt crept in. If they truly saw me as a stopgap because of my gender, what lengths would they go to shape their version of the future? I stood and paced, looking over the manicured estate grounds. This property had been in the family for generations, a symbol of our achievements in Chicago's competitive real estate market. I had fought to expand it responsibly, focusing on sustainable developments that enhanced our reputation and opened doors to partnerships. Yet now, I questioned whether my own family saw any of it as permanent. The betrayal in that footage wasn't just the act. It was realizing my contributions had been dismissed long before I even knew there was a fight. A few days later, I decided to act. I contacted a private laboratory in downtown Chicago, known for handling sensitive corporate cases. I sealed the remaining water from the party in a sterile container and added a fresh blood sample I'd drawn at an urgent care clinic. I delivered them to the lab, stressing urgency while minimizing explanation. Technician promised preliminary findings soon. Waiting was unbearable. 4 days later, the first update arrived. Unusual chemical traces had been detected, but could not yet be classified. The compound didn't match standard databases for poisons or contaminants, requiring cross-referencing. I couldn't afford delays, so I returned to the venue that night. Marcus Hale, who had given me his contact earlier, met me discreetly. He had saved one of the original glasses from our table and provided longer clips from a secondary camera, giving context to the table interactions. My nerves were on edge, freezing in the shadows whenever a janitor passed. With the enhanced samples delivered the following morning, the full report finally confirmed everything. A specialized industrial chemical, restricted to research settings, engineered to induce temporary cognitive impairment. It gradually affects concentration, short-term recall, and judgment, mimicking natural decline from overwork or age. Exposure can temporarily degrade performance, but prolonged use could make someone appear consistently incompetent in high-stakes roles. The lab noted that the substance's non-medical use violated federal restrictions on incapacitating agents, potentially falling under assault statutes if misused. To connect it directly to the source, I needed physical evidence from the estate. I waited until the family's regular golf retreat in Oak Brook, about 30 minutes away, giving me time to access the house. Saturday morning, once their cars had departed, I moved to Grant's private study on the first floor. Using a duplicate key I had kept from years ago while organizing his files, I opened the locked lower drawer of his desk. My pulse raced as I sifted through the papers. There they were. Detailed statements from multiple Las Vegas resorts, overdue balances totaling $3 million, with escalating interest and collection warnings. Tucked in a false bottom compartment was the matching vial, a small, unmarked glass with a dropper containing residue consistent with the lab findings. I photographed every page, carefully capturing account numbers, dates, and signatures for irrefutable proof. The process took longer than expected, my hands shaking slightly as I held the phone steady. Paranoia built with every creak of the old house. I finished just as gravel crunched outside, far earlier than planned. I restored the drawer, returned the key to my pocket, and exited through the side hall to my office upstairs. Moments later, I heard voices downstairs. They had returned early. I leaned against the wall, steadying my breath, relieved but shaken. The evidence was now solid, directly linking the substance to Grant. The following week was a battle with myself. I hid the encrypted drive containing all evidence in a locked safe behind books in my office. Sleep became nearly impossible. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, replaying family moments, questioning how it had come to this. Exposing the truth terrified me. Not only would it shatter the family's public image, but Grandpa Harold's fragile health made a confrontation dangerous. Staying silent, however, meant surrendering everything I had worked for, letting them rewrite my role in the company. The internal conflict left me exhausted and short-tempered. I decided to test the waters with my mother, hoping maternal instinct might override loyalty to tradition. I invited her to our usual Lincoln Park coffee spot, framing it as a discussion about work stress. On a quiet weekday morning, we sat at an outdoor table. I gently mentioned feeling off lately, asking if she had noticed anything different. Then I suggested that someone close might not want me leading the company. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression softening briefly before she sighed and set down her cup. Valerie, running an operation like this is demanding. Grandpa will come around eventually. Putting Grant in charge is better for the family's long-term stability. My stomach sank, but I pressed, asking if she really thought I wasn't strong enough. She gave a sad smile and touched my hand. It's not about strength. Our family has always passed leadership to sons. That's how we've maintained stability for generations. She didn't admit to wrongdoing, and when I hinted at foul play, her eyes quickly shifted away. The avoidance was clear. She was protecting the plan, prioritizing tradition over her own daughter. The rest of the conversation remained polite and superficial. Driving back, the weight of her choice settled heavily. That afternoon, walking alone through the estate gardens, I realized that blood ties didn't guarantee loyalty. Every past comment she made about my achievements now carried a new meaning. Praise, followed by subtle reminders of burnout or the need for balance, aligning conveniently with stepping aside. The pain wasn't only anger, it was the ache of loss, recognizing limits on a mother-daughter bond defined by outdated expectations. I sat on a bench overlooking the lake, weighing my options. Going public with the evidence would destroy more than reputations. It would erase the illusion of unity we projected to partners and competitors. By evening, I reviewed the files again on my laptop. The lab's clinical language contrasted sharply with the personal devastation it represented. I thought about Grandpa, who had built the firm from scratch in Chicago, overcoming economic downturns that sank others. He had trusted me for my drive and capability, not gender. Letting this scheme succeed would betray that trust, yet confronting it meant accepting my parents' choice of tradition over my well-being. The week blurred together. Meals skipped, minimal conversations with staff to hide distraction. I second-guessed every interaction, wondering if Brooke or Grant knew. The turning point came midweek when I overheard a phone call from Dad's study about finalizing details with Victor before the announcement party. Though unclear, the tone confirmed they were moving forward, confident my supposed decline would secure the plan. That snippet hardened me. Fear of losing the company shifted to resolve. Losing the business would hurt, but losing myself to manipulation was worse. Mom's words echoed, not as comfort, but as final push. She had chosen sides. I had to choose mine. With the inheritance party weeks away, I sought help from Thomas Whitaker, Grandpa's oldest friend and one of the company's founders. I met him after hours in his office, surrounded by old blueprints and photographs. I spread the evidence on his desk, lab reports, photographs, audio files. His reaction shifted from concern to outright fury. Without hesitation, he vowed we would safeguard Grandpa's legacy, no exceptions. The next challenge was moving critical documents. Original property deeds, founding share certificates, and primary contracts were stored across multiple secure locations, including the family's bank with strict monitoring. We could not risk large transfers triggering alerts. We divided the work into careful steps over several evenings, scanning and uploading portions before relocating originals to a neutral international facility accessible to Thomas through long-standing contacts. One close call occurred at a suburban branch when a manager recognized Thomas from prior dealings and questioned the transfer, which we covered as routine estate planning. It left us both tense for days, but every step brought us closer to securing the company against internal manipulation. Meanwhile, Thomas connected me with a specialist physician he trusted through discreet channels, someone experienced in treating exposure to restricted substances. Treatment began immediately, but recovery was neither quick nor predictable. Early stages brought intense vertigo that left me confined to bed for hours, unable to stand without the room spinning. Migraines followed relentlessly, and waves of fatigue made even answering emails difficult. I managed by staying mostly in my room or explaining that pressure from upcoming events was catching up with me. The doctor adjusted dosages cautiously, warning that moving too fast could temporarily worsen symptoms. Keeping up appearances became harder as my condition fluctuated. Grant noticed first, cornering me in the kitchen one morning with a pointed comment about how I seemed stronger lately. I brushed it off as occasional good days, but he pressed again a few evenings later during dinner preparations. Dad joined in during shortened strategy meetings, studying me closely before suggesting the leadership load might be too heavy right now. I leaned into the role they expected, trailing off mid-thought or resting my head in my hands to signal exhaustion. Grandpa's concern deepened with each report my parents shared about my struggles. They held private conversations with him, emphasizing the need for decisive action to protect the company's direction. He would pull me aside in the library, holding my hands and asking gently if I was truly okay managing everything. The guilt of keeping him in the dark weighed heavily, But revealing the truth too soon risked undoing everything we had secured. I reassured him weakly while the conflict churned inside me. Other risks surfaced as well. A scheduled bank audit nearly overlapped with a document transfer, forcing a last-minute cancellation. My symptoms remained unpredictable. Clear focus one moment, sudden nausea the next. I timed weaker moments around family gatherings, slouching or excusing myself early. Mom mostly observed in silence, her expression unreadable since our coffee meeting. The household tension grew as the inheritance party approached. The day of the announcement arrived, filling the estate outside Chicago with excitement and quiet pressure. More than 100 guests attended, longtime development partners, attorneys, bankers, and extended relatives. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, linen-covered tables, fresh orchids, and a string quartet playing softly. Servers moved through the room with champagne as conversations flowed about leases and redevelopment trends. I circulated carefully, greeting familiar faces, while intentionally letting my grip falter on my glass or pausing as if searching for words. Even executives I'd worked with closely responded with polite concern, suggesting I sit down. The act was draining but necessary, reinforcing the narrative my parents had shaped. Victor Langford arrived promptly, impeccably dressed and reminiscing about past deals. I kept my distance, watching him until the right moment. Throughout the evening, I checked preparations. The USB drive remained secure in my clutch, containing extended footage, audio recordings, lab reports, and images linking the substance to Grant's casino debts. An independent technician stood ready at the control station, prepared to act on my signal. My parents and Grant stayed close to Grandpa, their body language revealing. Mom touched his arm reassuringly, Dad spoke about stability, and Grant watched with visible anticipation. Grandpa's eyes found me often, showing both pride and worry. During a pause in music, he asked quietly how I was holding up. I reassured him, even as adrenaline surged, knowing the moment was near. As guests took their seats and dessert plates cleared, anticipation filled the room. The MC introduced Grandpa, sharing stories of his early risks and resilience. Applause followed as Grandpa rose, thanking partners who helped build the firm. My parents stood beside him, Grant barely hiding his expectation. The room fell silent as Grandpa prepared to announce his decision. Before he could speak, I stood and softly asked to say a few words of thanks first. I gave a faint smile and signaled the technician. The screen behind him lit up, playing the footage from my birthday party, my parents and Grant tampering with my drink, followed by audio of their planning discussions, lab findings detailing the chemical's effects, and images of the vial alongside Grant's gambling debts. Silence filled the room. Grandpa stared at the screen, then slowly turned toward my parents and Grant, his face pale as the truth settled in. Grandpa asked one thing, his voice rough and strained. "Is this true?" No one answered. Mom bowed her head, avoiding his gaze. Dad stammered something incoherent about misunderstandings. Grant went pale, opening and closing his mouth without sound. The guests shifted uneasily, whispers spreading as realization set in. I faced them directly, keeping my voice steady. "You did this to me because you believed a daughter couldn't lead, that only a son deserved to continue the family tradition." Victor Langford bolted toward the exit, knocking over a glass, but security personnel I'd arranged discreetly blocked the doors. Officers entered from side entrances, efficiently moving through the aisles. They read the charges: conspiracy to defraud and attempted harm. Dad, then Mom, Grant, and finally Victor were cuffed as the Miranda warnings were issued. Murmurs became gasps. Some longtime partners looked away, others stared openly at the family unraveling. Grandpa sank back, one hand on his chest, the other gripping the table. His eyes found mine. Pain and regret mixed in his gaze. I stood quietly as the people who raised me were led out past horrified guests. The quartet had stopped playing, leaving only footsteps and muffled protests. Brooke sat frozen beside Grant's empty seat, face buried in her hands. Officers escorted them to waiting vehicles outside. Flashbulbs captured the scene through windows, some media tipped off anonymously. Conversations erupted quietly inside. Questions about deals, concerns over stability. Sympathy came from those closest to Grandpa's generation. I stayed near the podium, watching reality settle. The betrayal was no longer private. It was public and undeniable. Grandpa reached for my hand. I squeezed it back, saying nothing. The evening meant to celebrate legacy had become its breaking point. Staff began clearing plates quietly, and partners approached cautiously, asking discreet questions about next steps. I focused on Grandpa's needs first. 10 months later, the legal outcomes were finalized in federal court. Douglas and Elainer each received 8-year sentences for conspiracy and attempted harm. Grant received 10 years, with additional time for directly administering the substance and financial fraud related to hidden gambling debts. Victor Langford's company collapsed under investigation, contracts were canceled, and regulators shut it down permanently after uncovering unethical practices. Grandpa survived the immediate shock, though it visibly affected his strength at 78. He spent weeks quieter than ever, attending medical checks, but refusing to stay away from the office completely. A few days each week, he came in for short visits, reviewing summaries I prepared, offering insights without mentioning the trial or those involved. We developed a new routine, quietly going over expansion proposals, his presence a steady reminder of the firm's endurance. I assumed full control of Stratton Real Estate Group, restructuring teams to focus on sustainable projects across Illinois. We closed major deals for eco-friendly commercial developments in suburban areas like Naperville and Schaumburg, achieving revenue growth that exceeded previous years. Partners loyal through the scandal expressed relief, and new investors joined cautiously at first, but committed as results appeared. Daily operations ran smoothly without the old tensions. Each morning, I walked into the boardroom on the top floor of our downtown headquarters, pausing to adjust framed photographs. A large print of Grandpa in his 40s at the site of his first major acquisition stood beside the photo of me signing the turnaround agreement that saved $20 million. Those two images side by side captured the real continuity of the firm. I removed all other family photos, including Douglas and Grant, replacing them with team achievements and project renderings. Brooke finalized her divorce after the arrests and moved out of state, severing ties completely. The estate felt different without constant comings and goings. Hallways were quieter, dinners smaller, focused on market trends or upcoming zoning hearings instead of the past. Staff adjusted, showing loyalty to the leadership that had guided us through the crisis. Looking back, I learned something fundamental about legacy. Blood relations don't guarantee shared values or trust. Sometimes they conceal the opposite. True inheritance isn't automatic by birth order or gender. It is earned through integrity, hard work, and decisions made when no one is watching. Grandpa and I rebuilt stronger, prioritizing principles over sentiment. The company thrives today, not despite what happened, but because we refuse to let betrayal define its future. Family, in the end, is those who show up with honesty and commitment.